周一長談，我哋繼續同大家傾下最近 C-24 法案就係公民法裏邊度係要改革，就係話而家我哋聯邦政府係可以同外國交換我哋新移民嘅一啲資料嚟確證認證呢啲資料係對定係啱定係唔啱，但係問題就係咁樣嘅做法會唔會係侵犯到我哋嚟申請移民嘅人，或者係已經係我哋公民嘅人嘅私人隱私權同埋佢嘅人權呢？我哋今日咧係請到 Joyce Murray， 佢係我哋溫哥華市 Quadra 區嘅國會議員，亦都係自由黨嘅，所以佢從另外一個角度嚟幫我哋去檢討下呢個聯邦政府所提出嘅呢啲法案到底有啲咩好處，亦都有啲咩壞處。Thank you. Coming back to our second half. In the beginning of the first half, I've talked about all the details that was hidden. I won't say hidden, but it was implanted into C-24, and now it comes into the light. And all these details they have talked about is really seems to fundamentally change the image that Canada is a country that welcomes immigrants, that needs immigrants, and we're doing everything to help immigrants to come here to Canada and start a new life. The government said that yes, it is, but to a lot of immigrant consultants and lawyers, they said no, it's not. What is your opinion on this?
Well, I am deeply concerned that the total of the kinds of changes that this government is making are very disrespectful of immigrants and discouraging. And I've heard from people at the citizenship and immigration town halls that I hold that they feel disrespected by the rules and the way that they're being applied. So BC, you know, I'm an immigrant too.
Yes.
And I think that so I came to Canada before the years of Prime Minister Pierre Elliott Trudeau. But we know that he opened up the doors in Canada to welcoming citizens, because welcoming newcomers to become citizens, and that's what's built our country. I mean, frankly, other than Indigenous people, we're all immigrants to Canada over the hundreds of years. So that is who Canada is. And so to start a process of closing those doors by really secretly making things much more difficult, I think sends a very bad signal to the rest of the world about what Canada is and who we are in the world. So just one example of this bill and how it contributes to that concern is that there's that a new citizenship will have to sign their intent to be a resident in Canada. Well, that sounds pretty simple. But the reality is that if somebody comes from from Taiwan, from Hong Kong, from the United States, for example, signs the intent to be a resident in Canada, actually acquires Canadian citizenship, and is offered the possibility of a scholarship to Oxford, to go study abroad, or a job that is perfect for them outside of Canada, they risk actually losing their citizenship. Because the government, the minister, could determine that they didn't have an intent to be a resident after all, and that's a basis for revoking citizenship. So citizenship that is so basic and fundamental to being a Canadian and building a life in this country is under this law is becoming something that the minister can give or take away, and it creates two classes of Canadians. I mean, as a Canadian now, and a single Canadian, I mean, not a dual citizen, I can go and study or work anywhere else as long as I choose to.
When I interviewed the government from the Conservative Party, their explanation was that it is not the criteria of revoking is really has to go through the court. our biggest concern is really, is that necessary to have this oath of intent to stay in Canada? Why at the same time, it is the law itself that has already said that you have to stay in Canada full 4 years within 6 years. And this kind of a redundancy. Do you think that by taking away the oath will help change that image of the not welcoming immigrants?
Well, BC, I think that we have to start with what is the intent of this government. And I don't see an intent to respect new immigrants and new citizens. And so if you start with a real intent to welcome and respect people who choose to build their lives in Canada, you can then have a framework of regulations that make sure that our citizenship opportunities are not abused. But I think that the evidence is adding up that this government is trying to limit citizenship. It is trying to limit citizens coming from Asia, frankly. They put many impediments in place to people from Asia coming to Canada that are not in place from Europe and other parts of the world. So I think that their intent is essentially anti-immigrant. And so whether it is the cutting off of the investor status, whether it's the cutting off of skilled labor applications and eliminating hundreds of thousands of people who had put their lives on hold to come to Canada and just erasing that waiting list, or whether it is the family reunification and how difficult it is to bring family members and how long it takes. These are all pieces in a puzzle that say that this government does not value immigrants to Canada.
Before I move to the next question, when you said about all these debates, I have a question, is that how does this kind of debate that comes from the oppositions that happens in the parliament, what was the response of the government during this debate on all the questions that you have just raised?
Well, the government, firstly, in a majority situation, can pass anything it wants. So we as a Liberal Party have raised these concerns, and I've raised these concerns in the debates. But for the most part, the public does not see the debate.
That's why I asked that question. I want to see how it happened, because most of the people didn't have the chance. The media doesn't report those kind of debates.
That's right.
So what was the response of the Minister of Citizenship and Immigration on all the questions that you have raised?
Well, he has his talking points to make it appear as though he cares about the immigrant community and new Canadians, but you have to look at the facts. You have to look at the fact that the time to receive citizenship since 2007 has more than doubled. So even after all of the waiting to get permanent residence status and to acquire Canadian citizenship takes twice as long. And why? I think the government has actually been forced to admit it's because they reduced the resources so that people are just in long waiting lines. And so the facts show that it's a worse situation. There's far more paperwork. There's for people who we would love to welcome as citizens very quickly. For example, students that have come from Asia to study here at UBC, do their postgraduate work, already have so many qualifications to contribute to our economy. Now, all of the time that they are in Canada before they get their permanent resident status, before that used to count to the years they have to be here, and now that doesn't count anymore. So it makes it harder for students to become citizens. It takes longer, harder for temporary foreign workers that have been coming again and again.
Well, I think our neighbor in the south has proven that overseas students, international students, studying in the country and grew up in the United States has really substantially contributed to the research, academic and business the improvement in the country.
And our economy is stalled here in Canada, and yet some of the bright, talented young people that we could be bringing in as citizens are being blocked.
Last question before we end the show is that the big ask above all these new regulations is that the government has said that they are really trying to uphold the value of a Canadian citizenship and to prevent people to come here just to buy a Canadian passport. Do you think all these regulations would serve this purpose? And most importantly, how would you like to see, what kind of new regulations you want to see so that it will uphold that value? Because no one can argue about that value.
Yeah, no, the importance of the value of Canadian citizenship and the Canadian passport is something that I think every Canadian supports. And it's something that that people who want to come and build a life in Canada, which can be a lot colder and more uncomfortable than some countries, frankly.
Australia, for instance.
That it is the value of Canadian citizenship. That's one of the key things that attracts them to come here. So we must uphold it, and that objective is a good one. But I think the way that this government is going about the changes they've been making has been to create two classes of Canadian citizens, and that does not uphold the value. That is a historic change, and it is, and as I said earlier, when a minister can make a decision to give or revoke a passport and a citizenship, that cheapens the value of Canadian citizenship. And BC, I mean, sadly, so many people have commented how internationally Canada's brand on the world stage has diminished. And the sense of Canada as a contributor in the global community to solutions, whether it's on the environment or on global economic issues, or it's on conflicts in other parts of the world, and Canada as a problem solver, our reputation is really diminished. We couldn't even get a seat on the UN Security Council, and that is a historic slap in the face for Canada. So I'm actually worried that qualified, very capable candidates from other countries will no longer be interested in coming to Canada, come here to be disrespected in their treatment, take years longer than in Australia or Great Britain to become citizens, and then have the eroded value of a second-class citizen in a way. If they have a dual citizenship, they are treated differently than if they don't. And so I think we may lose that very important strength of our country, and that's of having the great diversity of people to come here and feel fully 100% Canadian and part of building this great country.
Thank you. I'm glad that today we have your perspective because we have invited the government to come here to talk about why and what they are doing. And today we're glad that we have the chance to offer our audience a different perspective and to see how we can solve the same problem or uphold the same value that we all cherished. 周日長談，我哋今日咧係傾我哋繼續係傾緊我哋嘅新嘅移民法同新嘅公民法。我哋今日好高興請到我哋嘅國會議員 Joyce Mary 嚟從自由黨嘅角度嚟提出佢哋唔同嘅睇法，同埋佢哋認為應該點樣做先至比較合理。我哋聽到唔同嘅睇法，我哋大家觀眾自己去做一個判斷，自己去諗下。或者係點樣做會比較好啲呢？周日長談，我哋今日到此為止，我係林日佳 BC Lee。